I hope you feel the message of that song, that God is making something beautiful out of you. This whole reason for coming together like this on campus, I mean, you've got plenty of things to do. You've got homework, you've got tests to prepare for, projects, you've got things to be involved with, and yet we carve out this hour every Monday and Tuesday night, your small groups on the floor of your dorm, all for the purpose of allowing God to make you into something beautiful. And what we do here on Mondays is to contribute to that. So I'm thrilled you're here. I was sitting over there just looking up into the stands and just thinking about the many stories that God is writing in each one of your lives. And that song is so apropos, and I hope you got the message of it. And turn your attention to the screen. I want to speak from Mark chapter 4 this morning. If you have a Bible, turn there with me. Mark chapter 4, verses 35 through 41. I'm going to read these verses for you. You can follow along if you'd like. It says, "And the evening came, Jesus said to his disciples, 'Let's cross to the other side of the lake.' So they took Jesus in the boat and started out, leaving the crowds behind, although other boats followed. But soon a fierce storm came up. High waves were breaking into the boat, and it began to fill with water. Jesus was sleeping at the back of the boat with his head on a cushion. The disciples woke him up, shouting, 'Teacher, don't you care that we're going to drown?' When Jesus woke up, he rebuked the wind and said to the water, 'Silence, be still.' Suddenly the wind stopped, and there was a great calm. Then he asked them, 'Why are you afraid? Do you still have no faith?' The disciples were absolutely terrified. 'Who is this man?' they asked each other. 'Even the wind and the waves obey him.'" You know, we're in the middle of the semester, probably a little bit past the middle, and the holidays are approaching, and midterm projects are starting to settle in, and we're starting to get into a kind of a rhythm of life. And I'm sure you've already had some experiences this semester that have challenged you. And as much as we want to be on the mountaintop most of the time, when God is shaping us out of blessing, there are times when God shapes us in the midst of a storm. Even this morning, as we were beginning to gather together here to prepare for chapel, I was having some conversation with some students, and they were sharing some of the dramatic things that's going on in their lives right now. Some of you may be feeling like that, you know, I intend to sign up for school and come here to study and prepare my life for the future, and have storms involved with it. You never know what a day is going to bring. You never know what a week or a month or semester or school year. We just don't know. Kind of like these disciples that had spent a great deal of time with Jesus up to this point. They'd seen him minister the word and speak out truth and draw crowds together around him, and they were hanging on his every word. He was giving them hope like they've never had. And yet in the middle of all that, they find themselves in the midst of a storm. Some of you here are perhaps new to this whole experience of college, and maybe you're experiencing some things right now you didn't anticipate, you didn't plan for. Some of you have been around this deal for a while. You know things can happen. There's an ebb and flow to a semester, to a school year. I want you to see a little clip here from last year that might remind some of you of what can happen in the midst of a semester. How many of you were here last year when that hit? Yeah. That, for those of you that are new, that hailstorm blew through campus. That was at 59th Avenue and about Bell Road, so it was just a couple miles from here. But we were in the middle of a regular school day, and that hailstorm blew through here and tore up cars and buildings and trees. It was unbelievable. How many of you are still driving a golf ball shaped car? Yeah. You spent your insurance money, didn't you? Yeah, you did. Some of us, that upset the apple cart. Some of us rode that out like it was a great adventure. Some of you turned into storm chasers as a result of that experience. You're looking for the next one. And that dust storm starts rolling in, and you know there's a rainstorm behind it. Some of you are like, let's get in the car and go. Some of you are up for challenges, and others of us shrink when the challenge comes. We begin to panic and wonder what's happening. And so some of you right now are maybe in the midst of a storm, and you're inviting what God has for you in the midst of that. Not all of us are bent that way. Not all of us have the ability to say, you know what, all right, I got to fasten my seatbelt because this is going to be a little rough patch here. For most of us, it's a very difficult time when we find ourselves in the midst of a storm. Not a whole lot different than these disciples experienced when they were in the boat with Jesus. And I think it's a little curious what we find from this story about how life goes when we walk with Jesus. The storm that's described in here took place on the Sea of Galilee. The disciples got in a boat and they made their way across that sea. It was a lake, if you would, that's about as wide as it is from 35th Avenue, where this campus is, to just beyond the Biltmore. They started out on the lake in a boat, headed about that distance to the other side. They got somewhere out in the midst of that lake, and a storm blew in. And it's not unlike what happens a lot on the Sea of Galilee. Quite often you can get a boat and get in a boat and start making your way across the lake, and before you know it, it started out as a glassy water, and it can turn into a storm like you see on the Discovery Channel with, you know, the deadliest catch when the water's spilling up over the bow of the ship. It quite often can happen like that on the Sea of Galilee. The winds come from the east or from the northwest, different times of the year, and fishermen knew that it was unpredictable what you could run into when you set sail across the Galilee. We know that probably 7 of the 12 disciples were fishermen, so they were familiar with getting in a boat and going across the sea. So it wasn't uncharted territory for them. It was something that they were accustomed to. And yet the storm hit, fierce weather started to blow in, the water began to spill into the boat, to the point that desperation began to sink in for these experienced fishermen. Some of us here are perhaps going through storms right now. Maybe it's a financial storm. Maybe you didn't quite prepare for what you're experiencing now as a college student. Mom and Dad used to bail you out, and that $4,000 got spent in the month of October. Now it's like, oh man, now what do I do? I thought that was going to last me until May. And I've run through all my money. Mom and Dad's cut me off. Trying to figure out what to do now. It may be a health thing. Some of you may be struggling right now just to sit here because you feel terrible. You feel weak. You feel stressed. And your health is beginning to change a bit. You weren't quite prepared for that. Maybe it's your faith. Maybe you came here with a vibrant walk with God, and all of a sudden, since you've been here, it's been a little bit different. You begin to experience this independence, and all of a sudden, you've begun to question some things in your walk with God. You're wondering, is it really like Mom and Dad told me? Is it really like what my church instructed me? Is it really like what my pastor used to represent? I just don't know what I believe anymore. Maybe it's a crisis of morality or your own values, what's important. What used to be important doesn't seem to be important anymore. And all of a sudden your life is beginning to ebb and flow, and you're unsettled and struggling a bit, and it feels like a storm. You're doing things maybe you never thought you'd do. You're going, man, how did I get myself in this situation? Life is tough. Storms happen in all kinds of places, in all kinds of ways. Just like it did with these disciples. I think they knew that a storm could take place on that lake when they set sail. I don't think they're a whole lot different than you and I, as students of Jesus. That when they got in that boat with Him, they felt like, man, it's all good. Jesus in the boat. It's kind of curious to me when I was reading this. It's the only gospel that records that there were other boats on the lake as well. And most of us know what it's like to be around people of power and influence. Maybe you've been with some, maybe you haven't, but there's a funny level of security when we get around those people. We kind of hang out with them, kind of like, oh, this is all good. I'm safe in this space right now because I'm with somebody who has great influence. Maybe it seems like they have a hotline to God. So if I just hang out with them, it's all going to be good. So you can imagine the disciples, you know, come on, Jesus, let's go to the other side. Get in my boat, get in my boat. So Jesus climbs in the boat, goes to the back to get some rest. And here some of his students get in the boat kind of winking at each other. Yeah, Jesus is in our boat. And so others start setting sail from the water, and there they go, out across the Sea of Galilee with a few other boats on the water following them. But those in the boat that Jesus was in, I'm sure had a unique set of perspectives about their experience that they had just come from and what they were going to enjoy across the lake. Jesus is in the boat with us, so we're all good. I think there can be a false sense of security sometimes. We come to a Christian university and it's all good. Now I believe God's blessing us. I am thrilled to be here. I mean, if you were here Saturday night at the basketball game, see this whole place packed with purple. Now this isn't a church, so I can kind of go here. This is chapel at a Christian college, but here we had an opportunity to be together as a community and support some of our athletes and just be together as a community and cheer and agonize and celebrate and be disappointed and all those things that comes with an athletic event. So there's this false sense sometimes that comes from being a Christian community. Jesus is in the midst, it's all good. We're fine, we're okay. And then all of a sudden a storm hits. Nobody else seems to be experiencing the same thing that we're experiencing. We launch from the shore, but now we're in the midst of it. We're feeling it. Just like these disciples were. They began to ask this question that some of us sometimes ask. Jesus, do you care? Does he care about us? We're taking on water. We may drown. Now these are fishermen that knew the deal going across the water. So it must have been a pretty dramatic storm for them to say, we're about ready to drown, and Jesus at the back of the boat sleeping. Does he even care about what's going on with us? And I wonder how many of you are thinking the same thing about God. Man, I'm in the midst of this mess. I can't believe I'm here. I don't know how I got here. Seems like Jesus kind of cut me loose and I'm just adrift. I don't even know if he cares about me anymore. I don't feel it. It feels like my prayers are bouncing off the ceiling. Feels like I'm disconnected from his power and the intimacy that I once experienced. Seems like Jesus is asleep at the wheel. Now, I don't know if you feel like that or not, but there will come those times, just like it happened with the disciples. Who is this man? Is he who we thought he was? You know, some of you now are kind of at the end of your budget of your parents' faith. Some of you came from dynamic, believing, trusting homes. There's a certain canopy of grace that comes with that. When you're around people of faith and there's blessing in their lives and a family's life and it spills over into yours. And then all of a sudden you get out from underneath that canopy of blessing. You now become an independent agent, and all of a sudden you're separated from your mom and dad, and you're here learning how to be an independent soul. And it's scary out there. Some of you now are going, man, I don't know if I can make it. I'm wondering what happened to my faith. It used to be wonderful when I was at home in my church with my family, but now I'm out here by myself. And Jesus is trying to teach you how to walk with him. Now that you're out from underneath the umbrella of blessing that your family brought to your life experience, now it's on you to follow him. Now it's on you to trust him. Now it's you and him in the boat, and he's asking you, what do you believe about him? Is it religion or is it Jesus? Some of you here have never been around this kind of spiritual experience. To have individuals come into this chapel setting and open the Word of God and teach it like they believe it is new for some of you.